The following speaker is somebody who has been at this for many, many moons now. He has a lamestream media background, having worked in print for many years. He is uniquely qualified because of that in a way, but also because of his experiences as a child with an open mind, learning about things like the Kennedy assassination and all these things that inspired him at some point in his trip down the rabbit hole to cover these items, to go beyond the mainstream narrative, to speak truth, to research conspiracies. And Jim Marrs now is at it with one of his most important books, in my opinion, Population Control: How Corporate Owners Are Killing Us. Although that title sounds scary, it is an extremely solution-oriented book, which is right up our alley. But at the same time, it remains steadfast in exposing the evildoers and how they're trying to come after us every single day. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jim Marrs.
Howdy. You do better than that. Howdy. There you go. All right. Oh yeah, you can read my disclaimer here if you're really happy with your.
Check, check.
Check, check. Okay. Hey, actually, I'm Scotch-Irish, but there we go. This will be fun. That way I move around. Yeah, don't watch this if you're real satisfied with the way things are going, but I don't think you are. Okay, I got a long way to go, a short time to get there. So let me find out how we move this thing along. There we go. Population control. How corporate owners are killing us. Folks, this is really important. Some of you have heard me before talk about UFOs, talk about Kennedy assassination, talk about 9/11, and all this is important, okay? But what I'm going to talk to you about today is self-defense. Okay, this goes beyond philosophies, goes beyond politics. There are people out there running these global corporations, and they want you dead. All right, and they're working towards it. So we need to figure out who's doing that and how. First off, as we know, and this isn't any big surprise, we're now the corporate world. Okay. And the corporations run everything. It's really kind of interesting because the very definition of fascism is the combination of state and corporate power, okay? In Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, the state gained control over the corporations, and it was that combination that resulted in fascism. In the United States today, we've kind of done the opposite. The corporations have gained control over the state. But the end result's the same, fascism. And we need to be aware of that. So, in 1952, corporations accounted for 32% of the federal tax revenues. By 2013, this was less than 10%. So what we have here actually is corporate welfare. They are pushing this socialist state on us, and yet under socialism, it's supposed to be power to the people. Everybody, you work, and you receive for however much you put in, yada yada. But hey, today the money is all flowing upwards, and it's going into the pockets of the corporation. It's absolutely incredible. It used to be bad, now it's worse. And the main reason you never hear about all this is because there are now 5 major corporations that control everything you see and hear. And I'm not just talking about news. I'm talking about movies, records, billboards, book clubs, satellite, you name it. And it's all under tight control, and these corporations are in turn controlled by interlocking directorships and ownerships. So actually you have a small handful of people that can control everything you see and hear. This is why your neighbors just don't get it, okay? Because they watch TV. Now, to show you that that's not just some conspiracy theory, 2011, there was a study done by the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, and they analyzed 43,000 multinational corporations. They found they were essentially controlled by 1,318 companies with interlocking ownerships, and these, in turn, were pretty much controlled by about 147 interlocking firms that collectively controlled more than 60% of total global revenues, okay? And these 147 interlocking firms then were pretty much under the control of 20 banks. All right, now this is the control. Now, as you can see, this is incredible concentrated control. One of my heroes that has remained on my hero list, even though he's imperfect, okay, is, of course, Thomas Jefferson. He said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the private banks, restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Amen, brother. That's exactly where the problem is. Yep. And this was Thomas Jefferson. This is way the heck back there, you know. And, of course, they fought the central bank all through the history of the United States. Finally, it was put to rest about 1830 by Andrew Jackson, who called those private bankers a den of thieves, okay? And it was since 1830 and up through until about 1913 that this country really prospered. And then in 1913, by hook and crook and by their own definition, a conspiracy, they ran in the Federal Reserve System on us, which is neither federal nor does it have any reserves, okay? And it is a collection of private banks, which in turn are owned by other banks, which in turn are owned by stockholders, many of whom are not even American citizens. Now, have you wondered why we're in such shape we are? In fact, if you'll think about it, let me quickly tell you not only the biggest conspiracy going on, but the proof of conspiracy. Right now, while we're all sitting here in this nice hotel enjoying the ambiance and the good food and the good companionship, we kind of know that we have the technological capability today, off the shelf, not just futuristic stuff. I mean, it's available right now. We could feed, clothe, house, and give probably basic medical care to every single living person on this planet. We know we've got the capability. But yet, even as we sit here, we don't like to think about this, but if you'll think about it, in the back of your mind, we know that right now, while we're sitting here, there are literally thousands, if not millions, of children starving to death on this planet. Why is it that way? I doubt anyone in this room wants it that way. I don't want it that way. So why is it that way? Well, it's that way because once you get past the facile rationalizations, oh, well, it's money and it's politics and it's transportation, nah, all that can be taken care of. It's that way, folks, because somewhere somebody wants it that way. If nobody wanted it that way, it wouldn't be that way. And I might extrapolate that on up to our situation here in the United States of America. We still have a very rich country. We are rich in minerals, we are rich in uranium, we're rich in gas and oil, we're rich in coal. We have all kinds of wealthy material goods here in this country. And we have a reasonably intelligent workforce that really wants to work. The average person they just simply would like to have a nice job, something they can feel good about, make enough money to get along and get their family along. That's it. We got the workforce, we've got the wealth. Why is this country in such dire financial straits? Why do we owe, by official counts, more than $20 trillion? And unofficially, it's probably a whole lot more than that because they're not counting that derivative bubble and all the other problems we have. Why is it that way? Well, again, because what I'll tell you is because somebody wants it that way. If nobody wanted it that way, it wouldn't be that way. Now, the way they handle this is various ways. Briefly, I'm going to hit quickly on this, but you need to look into the Financial Stability Board. This was originally the Financial Stability Committee of the Bank for International Settlements. And if you've read my book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, you realize that the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, was created by and for the Nazis and continued to operate all through World War II, hoarding money, passing money, dealing with money from all of the belligerent nations. The war didn't have anything to do with them. And in 2009, President Obama at G20 signed us up for this Financial Stability Board, which is supposed to be standardizing the finances of the world economy. So essentially what he did is our economic policy now in the United States is in the hands of the international bankers. And we're going to be in big trouble here because, as we've already seen beginning to happen in Greece, Ireland, a few other places, the banks are now still toppling, all right? But there's a big difference. In 2008, they managed to get TARP money, the tax money, your money, to prop up those failing banks. Well, then they passed Dodd-Frank, and everybody went, yay, because here's a law that says you cannot use tax money to prop up a failing bank. Sounded good on the surface. But what this means is that the banks, which are still continuing to fail, are now have to go and try to figure out where they're going to get money, and they're going to get it from unsecured loans. That means your checking account, your savings account, okay? And you have to understand, when you give your money to a bank, it's not your money anymore. Legally, technically, they say it now belongs to the bank. So what they're doing in some of these other countries that are having such problems is, if you have $100 in the bank, they're going to say, well, I'm sorry, but we're having financial problems and we've spent your $100, but here, you have $100 worth of stock in our bank. Well, great. Now, stop and think about it. What's going to happen when they start going to negative interest rates and they start charging you for holding your money in the bank? They're already doing that, by the way. You realize when you give your money to a bank, they don't just stick it away in a safety deposit box and hold it for you. They use your money to make money. They loan it to other people, okay? If you put $100 in the bank under fractional banking, they can loan up to $10,000 because your 100 is what counts as their backing. And then when they get that $10,000 back at, say, 20% interest, you know, do you get the interest? No. And this is why years ago, after I figured this out, I banked with a little small state bank there in Texas, and I know the people that are running it. And years ago, I told the bank president, I said, let me tell you something. I said, I understand your game. I said, I'm not wild about you making money off my money. I said, but you do offer this safe, and, you know, you got guards, and you got, you know, this big building, and so I understand that you probably need to make something for taking care of my money. And I said, so if you're going to go out and make money on my money, I said, I don't like it, but I guess I can live with that. I said, but I'll be damned if I'm going to pay you for the privilege of earning money off my money. I said, so don't ever try to charge me some service charge. And they don't. Okay? And if everybody would go tell them the same thing, maybe we could cut down on some of this. But I don't have to tell you all. Think what happens. Every month you get your bank statement, there's always a little something else in there. Oh, usage, transfer fee, blah, blah, blah. They got 100 of them, okay? And this has just got to stop. Financial Stability Board. The other thing you have to watch out for is the Exchange Stabilization Fund. This is one you've never heard about, but it's a little known office of the Treasury that was actually began back in the 1930s during the Depression as a means of transferring gold between the United States and other countries. But it controls the New York Federal Reserve Bank, which dominates the Federal Reserve System. If the New York Federal Reserve says, we're going to do this, everybody else follows in line. It also handles the CIA's black budget. Has been mixed up in everything from drug trafficking to Iran-Contra, and even by some accounts mixed up in the Kennedy assassination. It is the architect of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, the two leading institutions which are robbing us and taking our money. So now we see that it's money and it's power, and we now have the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, National Defense Authorization Act. By the way, under the National Defense Authorization Act, that says the government can take control over our food, over gasoline, over transportation, over everything. One of the provisions is that the federal government can take control of all the water. Guess who, under this National Defense Authorization Act, guess who is in charge of all the water in this country except packaged, bottled corporate water? Of course, they sell and they don't have to take care of it. But if you have a well, or if you have a stream by your house, or if you're getting rain runoff off your roof and have a little barrel or whatever, guess who's in charge of all that? The Secretary of Defense. Whoa. Now, why? Yeah, let them come clean them out. It all comes back to the idea that the people who want to run the show think there's just too damn many of us. And this goes back to the eugenics program, which was begun back in the late 1800s. And interestingly enough, it didn't start in Germany. It started here in the United States. And this chart right here, you can see this chart was in 1939. And the majority of the states, all the states with the cross-hatching, these are states that had sterilization laws on the book. If you didn't measure up to their idea of a good human, height, weight, ethnicity, skin color, et cetera, then you were at risk of involuntary sterilization. Now, it got carried to the extreme over in Germany because they got hold of the eugenics movement and said, hey, it's pretty good. You know, let's clean up the race. Let's create a master race. And of course, we all know how that turned out. And so eugenics kind of, the term fell into ill repute. But it was all about cleaning up the dirty gene pool, okay? Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, is quoted as saying, colored people are like human weeds, need to be exterminated. And don't think that is all gone out of fashion, because Hillary Clinton says, I admire Margaret Sanger, her courage, her tenacity, her vision. So yeah, it's still going on. We know about the scandal over Planned Parenthood where they were selling the fetus body parts. That's still ongoing. And what I find interesting is the guy who went into these clinics with a hidden camera and got it on tape and put it up on the internet so we could see what was actually going on. He's the one that's now in jail for illegally taping somebody, see. Oh, man. So, population control is nothing new. It goes back to eugenics, and it comes forward, and they are using various methods. We see the chemtrails. This is barium, aluminum oxide, all kinds of things they're putting in the air, and we're breathing it. And don't think that you all are exempt, because coming up here yesterday, I'm looking out the plane window, and here's the cross-hatching chemtrails all over Philadelphia. Fluoridation, putting fluoride in the water, a little more on that later. Vaccines. I want everybody to understand I am not totally anti-vaccine. I think vaccines can be very helpful, but I think it's gotten out of hand, and we need to demand more accountability for what they're putting in the vaccines. We know they're putting mercury in there, and when they're putting aluminum, and it's causing a problem. Some of you are probably aware of the little hoorah over that the film that Robert De Niro was forced to cancel at a film festival. Well, good for Robert. He finally got some cojones, and now he was on a national talk show, and he said, you know, I shouldn't have done that. There's question. We should have open dialogue and open discourse on the idea of vaccinations, and he encouraged everybody to go see that movie. He said what?
He said he was going to release it on YouTube.
Oh, cool. He said he's going to release it on YouTube. Well, everybody watch it. And also, you'll read all of this in my new book, Population Control. There was a Dr. Thompson who worked for the CDC and was involved for several years with their studies on the connection between autism and the vaccines. And he said, yes, I feel bad because we covered it all up. So this is really terrible. It all comes back to the idea that there's too many people, you know. And some of you guys that live in Philadelphia, for example, and you have to wade your way through traffic every day, it's very easy to say, yeah, it's just too many people. We need to cut down on this. And of course, we've got the Georgia Guidestones where the very first admonition is maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Oh, doesn't that sound warm and fuzzy? We all like that, okay? And actually that might be real nice, except for the fact that there are now 7.5 billion of us on this world. And this leads me to the burning question. If they reduce the population to 500 million, what are they going to do with the other 7 billion of us? And more importantly, who's going to decide what happens to the other 7 billion of us? And that's where we start running into problems. But let's look what the globalists have to say. Jacques Cousteau says, reduce the population by encouraging abortion and sterilization. He's all for it. General Maxwell Taylor, you know, who is our ambassador to Vietnam, and he's the one, I believe, that when Reagan was shot, came on TV and said, I'm in charge here, and kind of let the cat out of the bag. He says that it'll be necessary to reduce the world's population, mostly in third world countries, using methods such as disease, starvation, regional wars. He concluded, I've already written off more than 1 billion people. The population crisis and the food supply question dictate that we should not even try. It's a waste of time. And we hear Henry Kissinger says depopulation should be the highest priority of U.S. foreign policy. The globalists all agree. We got to cut down on the population. And don't think that that's just people on the fringe. Here we see with President Obama, his science czar, John Holdren, who years ago published this book, Eco Science, in which he said that many of my colleagues feel that some sort of compulsory birth control regulation will be necessary to achieve control over population growth. One plan often mentioned involves the addition of temporary sterilants to water supplies or staple food. Doses of the antidote would be carefully rationed by the government to produce the desired population effect, okay? So if you know somebody or you got a lot of money or whatever, then see, you might get the antidote. It's absolutely incredible. Now, Prince Philip is a good example. He's the consummate globalist. Member of the royal family. He goes to the Bilderberg meetings, you know, and he says human population growth is probably the single most serious long-term threat to survival. If it isn't controlled voluntarily, it will be controlled involuntarily by an increase in disease, starvation, and war. And just to show you how serious he is, at another point he says, in the event that I am reincarnated, I'd like to return as a deadly virus in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation. See, it'd really be funny, except he wants you dead. He doesn't want you alive. So, global depopulation through eugenics, fluoride, vaccines, GMOs, war, drugs, arms. This is exactly what the problem is. Now, my question is, and I question this, is there really an overpopulation problem? Well, all I would do is challenge each and every one of you, come drive from Dallas to El Paso. If you're lucky, you might see a tree. Just miles and miles out in West Texas, and that's just West Texas. We took a little drive here last night up through, I don't know where we were, it was dark, but there's beautiful woods. You got some beautiful countryside around here. There's lots of places. Okay, I heard this and I couldn't believe it, but it's true. Right now, the current average living space in Hong Kong, and if you picture all those high-rise buildings on those islands, is 1,700 square feet. Whoa, as a young man, I lived in a lot of apartments, and I don't think any of my apartments were that big. 1,700 square feet, that's a pretty good sized apartment. Based on 1,700 square feet, the entire population of the world, 7.5 billion, could live comfortably enough in the state of Texas. Now, what? Don't go running down there and let's, you know. You know, we got bumper stickers in Texas that says, "Welcome to Texas, now go home." The problem, of course, is it's not overpopulation, it's population density. They're trying to corral everybody into these mega cities where they can get control over you, keep you bottled up in there, and then sell you food, water, etc., you know, and make you totally dependent on a daddy, mommy government that will take care of everybody. In fact, if you want to know the basic problem in the country today, we have more people voting for a living than working for a living. Now, Henry Kissinger got it down. He says, control oil, you control nations. Control the food, you control the people. And folks, this is what they're after. I'm going to touch lightly on this because most of you all already know about eating well and eating good food. But it's funny, you know, these are weapons of mass destruction. Deadly food, GMOs, soft drinks, aspartame. By the way, in case I forget about it, I definitely want to mention this. There is hope. We can do something. Pepsi-Cola recently announced that they were withdrawing aspartame from their diet drinks, okay? Now, did they suddenly just decide to do that because the tests show that aspartame, when it gets in your body, changes to formaldehyde and it calcifies your brain, and they thought, well, we'll do good? No. They themselves, in their press releases, said they were doing this, they were taking the aspartame out because of public demand. Enough people woke up, enough people, yes. Enough people woke up and said, listen, aspartame is not good. In fact, I guess you all know that it was rammed through against the wishes and advice of the national certification officers in Washington by Donald Rumsfeld, okay, when he was head of Searle. And he was part of the Reagan transition team, and he told his people at Searle, he said, we're having trouble getting this through because they find it's a carcinogenic, but don't worry, I'll get it through. And he did. And he was primarily responsible for appointing the head of the FDA at that time, who then slipped in aspartame as a sugar substitute. And then after that died down and nobody was looking, he then extended that to all diet drinks. So if you're drinking diet drinks, Diet Cola, Diet Dr. Pepper, and now except maybe Pepsi, you're getting aspartame. And if you get enough of it, it's going to make you sick. I don't even have to go into burgers and, you know, fries and like that. The thing that bothers me is that I've tried to go on diets, I've tried to eat right, but what I found out is that it costs more money to eat healthy, right? If you want to buy fresh vegetables, you want to buy non-GMO stuff and all like that, you have to pay more than for the junk. It ought to be the other way around, right? I'm all for freedom. If somebody wants to stuff themselves with big old greasy cheeseburgers, you know, fine. But you ought to pay more for that than for the healthy food. Oh, well, enough of that. If you go back and look, I know when I was a kid, the grocery stores, we didn't have supermarkets. We had local grocery stores, and they were run by local people, and they mostly had local produce. By the 60s, everything was getting processed and packaged, and that's where the trouble began. By the 70s, the American diet consisted of non-nutritious white bread, other unnatural food products. Excuse me. You see here we got a loaf of Wonder Bread. If it was nutritious, it's a wonder. And today, of course, we just have nothing but sugar, grains, bromide in the bread. We got all this stuff that is not good for us, and we're feeling the results of it. Obesity is now one of the biggest problems in this country. And it's not because everybody's eating sugar, it's because they're eating bread and soy, GMO soy and all this stuff. You need to be very particular about what you're eating. Here's where we go. Today, survey of more than 3.5 million American adults showed from 93 to 2008, obesity increased by a whopping 85%. And I know where I come from, in rural Texas, the diet is usually chicken fried steak and French fries, you know, and you can tell it because you go to Walmart and I swear 3 out of every 5 women are obese. I mean, really obese. And unfortunately, see, they just don't know any different because they watch TV and they're sold this whole bill of goods. In fact, here we go. At the current rates, by 2020, half the population will be obese. And I love this illustration because here you see the old 57 Chevrolet and the future as was pictured in 1950s, and then you see the reality. Overweight, shopping at Walmart with the chemtrails overhead. All right, so what do you do about it? You eat organic food, that's what you do, and you eat grass-fed beef if you're going to have beef. Start growing your own vegetables. We have some of these little grow boxes, plus we have the, what do they call it, the 4 square foot garden thing, you know, that my wife works on. We get a lot of fresh stuff, fresh peppers and fresh tomatoes and chive and all kinds of good stuff. Grow it yourself. You can do it. And you say, well, I live in an apartment. That's all right. Get your grow box, put it in the window. Or go up on the roof, put something up there. And you'll be glad you did. Number one, it's very relaxing. It kind of gets you next to nature. And if things go bad, you got something to eat. Quickly, I want to talk about the God Syndicate. This is one of the problems we have. Guns, oil, and drugs. The 3 largest money-making commodities in the world today. I'll go lightly on guns because I realize I'm up here in Philadelphia. Ooh, guns. Ooh, we don't want any guns. No guns. Take the guns away. Ooh, guns hurt people. So I don't want to get too big with this, but I do want to point out that according to congressional reports, over the past couple of decades, it is us, the United States of America, that is responsible for 78% of the arms sales around the world. We are the ones causing all the problems. And you say, yeah, but we have to keep up with Russia and China. No. According to these same reports, Russia 5.7%, China 3%. So Russia and China combined only account for 8% of the arms deals in the world. The rest of it is us. And I'm not going to go too far into this except now you understand what's going on here, and you'll understand that terrible incident in Benghazi where our ambassador was killed, because I'll tell you the truth of that matter is, and the reason they had stonewalled and they don't want to bring it out, is because Ambassador Stevens stumbled across the fact that direct commercial sales, an entity within the Pentagon that allows private companies to sell arms all around the world, was allowing them to sell all these Stinger missiles to the Syrian rebels, most of whom were Al-Qaeda, and the rest were ISIS. And we're arming these very people that we claim we're supposed to be in war against. He learned about this. He would have blown the whistle on it, so they had to arrange an attack, and he and his Marine Guards got killed. And the military, who was all poised to send in rescue teams, was told to stand down, and that came from the highest levels of the U.S. government, mainly Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, and Obama, of course. Direct commercial sales, that's something that you really need to look into. We also know briefly about the Fast and Furious thing that the ATF got mixed up in, where they were strong-arming American gun dealers to sell guns to the Mexican drug lords, ostensibly to track them into Mexico. And that doesn't make any sense to me, because if you sell a drug lord some guns and he goes back into Mexico, how are you going to track what he does with them? You can't. What this was all about was to try to demonize gun sales, gun shows, tell everybody this is bad, it's falling into the hands of the Mexican drug lords, and we got to outlaw all this. It was an anti-gun move. And why do they want to take up the guns anyway? Because disarmed people can't defend themselves. We'll get to this a little bit about the school shootings. That's something that you really should be concerned about, but that's got a whole new wrinkle too. Moving right along, while we're spending all this money on warfare and arms around the world, the American Society of Civil Engineers in 2013 gave the USA a D+ for our infrastructure. And I'm sure I don't have to explain this to you folks. You've seen the streets with potholes. You've seen the bridges that are deteriorating. You've seen all of this infrastructure that seems to be just wearing out and nothing gets done about it. Hey, but by God, they've come up with the money to go out on these freeways and put in that concrete with the steel post and the steel cables or the concrete wall so you can't turn around on the freeway. Do any of y'all ever remember having a big problem with people making U-turns on the freeway? No. You know what this is? They're getting ready to lock down the cities. And when you see that coming, you say, I got to get out. You'll start heading out, and then you'll see the police checkpoint up ahead, and you'll go, oops, I don't want to run into that. You can't turn around. You're going to be trapped. So they got money for that. They got money for those ubiquitous cameras that are spying on you 24/7, but we haven't got money to fix the bridge, the road. It's really ridiculous. And so what's really funny is despite having less than 5% of the world's population, we've got roughly 35 to 50% of the world's civilian-owned guns. That's why they've got to destroy America, okay? We have a tradition of individual freedom and liberty. We have a Constitution, a Bill of Rights, which gives us the legal foundation for that individual freedom and liberty, and we got guns. So we can actually stand up for our individual liberty, but they're working on that, aren't they? They really want to take it away. Real quick, I just want you to notice this. Pennsylvania in 2012, 470 gun deaths. New York, 774. The whole state of California had 1304. And these are all states with very, very strict, harsh anti-gun laws. Well, let's look at Alabama. They don't have harsh gun laws. They had one gun death. Believe me, folks, if you want to be safe, pack a gun. Oil is the next big one, of course. And what we've heard is this Marion King Hubert, who back in the 50s said, well, we're at peak oil. We're running out. Oh, my God. And that's why the prices went sky high. I hate to date myself, but when I was a young man, you could buy gasoline for 25 cents a gallon, In fact, I got in trouble with my current wife, but at the time she wasn't. We were just dating, and we pulled in a gas station, and I ran in to use the men's room, and she told the attendant to put $1 worth of gas in my car. I came out, and I went, oh, no, I only wanted 50 cents worth. I said, now I don't have enough money to go to the picture show, so I had to borrow money from my date so we could go to the picture show. But it's now, peak oil is nonsense. It's a hoax. It's not right. For one thing, production in 2011, 2012 was at all-time highs. If you'll be looking now that the cost per barrel is, dropped down almost to $10. I think it's up now more past 20, 25, but it's still, real cheap. We're overflowing with oil. Plus, if anybody tries to tell you we're running out of oil, you just tell them these 3 words: Bakken Rock Formation. The Bakken Rock Formation underlies Montana, North Dakota, a little bit into Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and it is untapped. They say there's enough petroleum in the Bakken Rock Formation to give us gasoline, petroleum at increased rates of consumption for the next 2,000 years, okay? So there's no shortage of petroleum, but we need to get away from petroleum because it's killing us. It's choking us. It's killing off the sea life. Every time there's an oil spill, we're messed up. By the way, don't think the oil spill in the Gulf is all over and done with in ancient history. It's still leaking. They're still spraying Corexit down in the Gulf. In fact, I want to tell you something. I'm just passing it along for your own information, but me and my friends and everybody I know in Texas, we will not eat anything out of the Gulf, okay? And there are Gulf fishermen who advise that. So what do? Well, we go to cleaner energy. You folks up here probably need to keep those coal-fired plants because you got a lot of coal. That could work. But see, they talk about a national energy policy. We don't need or want a national energy policy. We need a regional energy policy. You guys got coal, use coal-fired plants. Down where I come from, we can do solar. We got sunlight most of the year. And when the sun's not out, then it's kind of stormy and the wind's blowing. So if we have some wind turbines, we could do that too. It's all there. In fact, Tesla, which a lot of you all are familiar with, you know, he showed that we can just be drawing energy out of the earth. One thing bothers me, and I'll get to this a little bit, about the drought conditions in California, and they're going, oh my God, how are we going to get water? Wait a minute, they got a whole coastline on the Pacific Ocean. Why can't they build some desalination plants that are powered by the waves, by the tides that come in? You know, there you go. See, there are ways of doing these things, but you know, here's the problem. Years ago, I was talking to a energy expert, and I had gotten real big on solar power. I said, well, you know, how about solar power? We can get power from the sun. He went, oh, well, he said, that sounds real good, but that's 20 years in the future. Well, that was 20 years ago. Still don't have it, do we? But then he said, do you realize it would take solar panels, collectors, covering the state of Arizona to provide enough electricity to power the city of Los Angeles? And I went, oh, wow, okay, yeah. And I go off and I'm thinking about that, and I think probably that's basically kind of true. But then it dawned on me where the problem was with his thinking. He's been trained, educated, and conditioned to only think in terms of central generation. You got to generate the electricity and then sell it to Los Angeles. And I'm going, wait a minute, what if everybody in Los Angeles put solar collectors on their roof, okay? Then they power their own needs, and of course the problem with that is that the power companies hadn't figured out how to make a cloud hang over your house if you don't pay your electric bill. And believe me, everybody pays an electric bill. Bill Gates pays an electric bill, okay? Everybody has to pay the electric bill. But why? You know, if we had Tesla, we could be pulling energy out of the earth. We could use anything you want to. Folks, the technology is there. It's just the will is not, because the public is not aware that we have these alternatives. Quickly, let's go to drugs. Oh boy, well, of course we know they're illegal drugs, just say no, but it gets worse. Big Pharma in 2008 grossed nearly $1 trillion worldwide just selling drugs, and more than 80 billion of that was for the psychiatric drugs. And this is where it's causing a real problem. We're the most drug nation in history. Alcohol prohibition lasted from 1920 to 1933. Drug prohibition has been since 1930 and is still going, except for a few places like Washington State and Colorado. And here's something that's interesting. I want to pass this along. In 1933, when the federal government did away with the Volstead Act, the law against alcohol, and a constitutional amendment that prohibited the manufacture and sale, distribution of alcohol. Did they do that out of the goodness of their heart? Did they do that saying, gee, we're keeping people from drinking, so, you know, let's let them drink? No. Here's what happened, and y'all take note of this, because we could be doing that today. In fact, it is happening. It's just not being talked about because we don't control the media. The reason alcohol prohibition came to a halt was because the states, one after another, said, we can't afford to enforce this thing, and we're just not going to do it. And one state after another quit enforcing those federal anti-alcohol laws, and at a certain point, the federal government just threw up their hands and said, well, this isn't working. So they did away not only with the law, but with a constitutional amendment. Keep that in mind. We are more powerful than we know we are if we'll all just get together and stand up and say, okay, we don't want this, and we do want that. And it's already happening now with this, even backwards Texas. It's still against the law for pot in Texas, but they have okayed medical marijuana. So there's people in Texas now getting some relief. And in all these other states, you guys just need to get active and say, okay, let's get some common sense back into things here. In fact, there's even a law enforcement against prohibition. There is and these are law enforcement guys, and they realize the futility and the idiocy of trying to outlaw marijuana. At the University of Madrid, also at the University of London, they've done studies to show that the tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana, can actually cure cancer. Whoa, now wait a minute. We got people dying right and left of cancer, and yet the cure is illegal? Come on, folks, what's wrong with this picture? One of the reasons that they want to keep it all illegal is that we have made a whole industry out of the prison systems, okay? We have more people imprisoned in the United States than in all the Western European nations combined. And that's because we've turned them over to private companies, and their whole thing is they get paid so much for a living body in a cell. So do you think they have any incentive for trying to rehabilitate somebody, put them back on the street? No. Now, there's those that are even calling the AMA, the American Murder Association. And this is simply because, according to the late Dr. Barbara Starfield, this was actually published in the JAMA, the official publication of the American Medical Association, back in about 2010 or so. She statistically showed that the third leading cause of death to Americans, number one is heart disease, heart attacks. Number two is cancer. Number three is conventional medical treatment. Not drug overdoses, not illegal drugs, but just conventional medical treatment. You go in the hospital, they give you the wrong medication, or they botch up your surgery, or, whatever. There have been doctors who've been caught diagnosing their patients as cancer patients, putting them on chemotherapy when they did not even have cancer, okay? And yet, so the American medical establishment has gotten totally out of control. They have bought into their own propaganda that they are next to God, and you're not supposed to question them. So we have to do something about that. With profits of more than $160 billion a year for cancer, you can see that there are more people making a living off of cancer than dying from it. And that's why we don't have a cure. But the main reason we don't have a cure is simply that cancer can be taken care of by a change in lifestyle and a change in diet. But how many people want to hear that from their doctor? They want to say, give me a pill. Give me something I can take and I'll be cured, And most people do not want to go through the changes of lifestyle that it would take to prevent cancer. But I will tell you this. Let me see where we're going here. Yeah, okay, I'll get to that in a minute. There are cures, by the way. Any of y'all familiar with Dr. Raymond Rife? All right. I've had a Rife machine now for about 16 years. Actually, I got 3 of them. And originally I got it because my youngest daughter had chronic asthma ever since she was a little bitty kid. And it just got worse and worse. Every year there's at least 2 trips to the emergency room. We had to have those nebulizers to keep her breathing. We were spending, up to $400 or $500 a month on medications, and she just looked terrible. She was skinny, had rings under her eyes and everything else. Finally, a doctor, an osteopath friend of mine, said, have you tried Rife techniques? And I said, what's that? So I looked into Royal Raymond Rife and his frequency treatments. So he said, I've got a machine, come try it out. So we drove up near the Oklahoma border where he was practicing one Sunday, and he ran my daughter on the Rife machine, and she's now 34 and has never had another serious asthma attack since that time. She still carries one of those little, I call them breathers, whatever they call them, inhaler, thank you. But she only uses that if she gets in a stressful situation or just some unusual situation. What's also interesting is that at the time I did this, it was like 15 years ago, I was starting to get aged, And I told this doctor friend of mine, I said, I'm starting to get these aches and pains in my hand. You know, what's going on? He said, it's arthritis, you know. I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, you've got this bacteria that builds up in your cartilage, in your joints. And if it's left untreated, eventually it can eat away the cartilage and your bones will start rubbing together, and then you get rheumatoid arthritis, and you've really got a problem. So I said, well, why do I do that? And he said, here, run the Rife machine on arthritis. So I held the little electrodes, and he put me on this machine for about 15, maybe 20 minutes at the most. And man, I went away, and all the pain went away. And so I decided, I think I want to get one of these machines. And like I said, I've had one for 16 years. I'm now 72, and I don't have any problem with arthritis because every time I start aching, I run the machine, and it kills that bacteria. There are solutions, okay? Maybe that's not the one, but you can find things, all right? Now, here's the problem. The Journal of National Cancer Institute estimated that a one-year cost of cancer treatment for one individual comes to $2.3 billion. That includes time spent getting care, chemo, radiation therapy, blood tests, cancer screening, surgery, checkups, driving to medical appointments, just waiting. Does not even count the days spent at home recovering from surgery or chemotherapy. $3.2 billion. What I did was figure out on the Rife machine, going by their frequency and their time, you know, how much it would take to knock down your cancer with Rife technology. It came out to 33 cents worth of electricity. So now you can see why that you're not going to hear from officialdom about any treatment other than chemotherapy. Now, for those of you who are concerned about cancer, here it is in a nutshell. Dr. Otto Heinrich Warburg, yes, one of the famous Warburg, the banking family Warburg, but he turned to medicine. And in 1923, he received the Nobel Prize, and he came up and decided that there are two conditions, okay? Cancerous tissues thrive in an acidic environment. Acidic means sugar, and sugar doesn't necessarily mean cane sugar. You know, bread changes to sugar in your system. So if you're eating a lot of pasta, a lot of bread, and a lot of things that causes your system to become acidic, the cancer cells can grow. If you keep your body alkaline, he found that cancer cells cannot grow in an alkaline environment. So any of you who are concerned about cancer, whether you have it or you're afraid you might get it, just start working to keep your body alkaline, and you shouldn't have any problem. But again, with $3.2 billion in the thing, they're not going to tell you about that. Well, let's move right along, other than I love this cartoon here. It says FDA-approved drug, and then on the side it says, warning, contains FDA-approved drug. Bill Gates, a consummate New World Order guy, he wants to solve the overpopulation problem by vaccines. Let's vaccine everybody. 2014, UNICEF and the World Health Organization injected 2 million Kenyan women with a vaccine that was found laced with a human sterilization chemical. Are we sitting here trying to, is that part of the depopulation program? And then you look at back in 1950, children got 13 doses of 4 vaccines for diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, and smallpox. Today, they're recommending 48 doses of 14 vaccines by the age of 6. And then they wonder why these children turn autistic. Some of them, thank God, not all of them. But we need to start looking much more seriously at vaccines. And the key thing is that in the Reagan years, Congress passed this law that absolved the vaccination companies, the pharmaceutical companies, from any liability for damage they do. But they did set up a government vaccine conditioning system, a payback system, and since that time, up till today, they have now paid out over $3 billion to families who have shown that their children were damaged by vaccines. So don't buy this propaganda that they're all perfectly safe and everything's just fine. In the UK here recently, they just paid out $90 million to 800 families of children who were harmed by the swine flu vaccine. Okay, here's a little bit of what's involved in these vaccines, and sometimes it's not even the vaccine. It's the thimerosal, it's the formaldehyde, it's the aluminum in there. So, you know, we've got to get some of this stuff out of there. Moving right along, I will point out that here's the problem. This is Dr. Julie Gerberding, and during the Bush administration, George W., she was head of the CDC, and of course, extolling the virtues of vaccine. Be sure and get your vaccine. And then soon as Bush was out of office, she resigned to become president of Merck Pharmaceuticals' vaccine division. Now, you know, I'm not even prepared to say whether there was actual conflict of interest here, but it sure looks like it, doesn't it? And we need to get away from that. By the way, but the experts tell us that vaccines are perfectly safe. Well, some of you may remember when doctors were telling us smoke cigarettes, they're good for you, right? So just because some expert tells you something, don't listen to it. If there's one thing we do need to be concerned about, it's the school shootings. But I want to tell you something. I grew up in Texas, and I'm going to tell you a little secret. We took guns to school. I had friends with pickup trucks with rifles, shotgun in the back. They go hunting after school or before school. I remember I even one time took a rifle to school because I said, hey, look, my new rifle. And I'm going to show it off to all my friends, you know. So we had guns and we took them to school. Nobody shot anybody, okay? It's not the guns, regardless of what the control media tells you. It's the drugs. Every single school shooting since Columbine in 1999 involves medicated shooters. And I can run through the list here. Elliot Rogers and Cho, and you remember these stories. And here's another list of them. Every one of them, they're either on psychotropic drugs or they're coming off of psychotropic drugs, which apparently is even worse than going on them. In fact, right there it says contraindications. It promotes suicidal and homicidal tendencies. And this is what we're giving disturbed kids? No wonder we have these problems. I know it's all changed. When I was in elementary school, I've been a reader since the get-go. By the time I was in the 5th, 6th grade, I'd read all the books considered classics like Black Beauty and Tale of Two Cities, Rudyard Kipling, all these books. And I'd already kind of turned to science fiction, and I was reading Ray Bradbury and Arthur C. Clarke, so I was kind of ahead of the game. So we'd be in class in elementary school, and we'd be reading by rote, everybody stay with the class, and I'm bored. I'd already read 2 chapters ahead. So I'm looking out the window. And so the teacher back then, the days of the old republic, she'd come around, slap me on the wrist and say, come on, Jimmy, stay with the rest of the class. Yes, ma'am. I'd go back where they were and keep reading. Today, they would send me to the school nurse who's been conditioned and trained to say, well, he's got attention deficit disorder. And they send me to the school psychologist or the psychiatrist, and they put me on Ritalin or Prozac. It's absolutely amazing what's going on. 2013, the CDC reported that Medicaid spent $3.8 billion yearly on antipsychotic drugs, including 14,000 children, many under the age of 3. Now, I'm sorry. Now, I do realize that in rare occasions, there may be a child that has some sort of mental problem. Either hereditary or maybe hit their head or something like that. Well, you can't tell me that 14,000 kids under the age of 3 need psychotic drugs. It's just ridiculous. But why don't we hear about this? Well, it's real simple. Because if you all watch TV at all, you'll know that when they cut to a commercial, if they're not selling you a car or a truck, they're selling you a drug. It's probably one of, if not the largest advertiser in the country. They have bought up the government, they bought up the CDC, and they control the media because the media does not want to lose those advertising dollars. So all they can tell you about, all they can talk about is the guns. Take up the guns, take up the guns. No, we need to take up the drugs. And what's even worse is, being an Army veteran myself, is look what these drugs have done to our men and women in uniform. Nobody has a greater respect than me for any man or woman that goes off to serve in the armed services and protect this country. But they are being grossly abused, starting with being sent to fight unnecessary wars, okay, just for the benefit of the corporations. And then when they do put their life on the line and they get damaged, they get wounded, they get traumatized, what kind of help they get? They don't get any. Remember the VA scandal? They're waiting months and months and months. A lot of them died before they could even get any treatment. Now, wait a minute. That's not right. If we expect people to go and lay their life on the line for this country, the least the country can do is try to give them some decent help and fit them back into society. And yet, over the past several years, the leading cause of death in the U.S. military is not gunfire or warfare, it's suicide. Now that's really incredible. And when you go and look, it's because of the psychotropic drugs. You've got to start working on this. Hurrying on through here. Deadly water. The head of Dow Chemical, Andrew Laveris, says water is the oil of the 21st century. And this is true. When I was growing up, somebody said, where's the, when I worked in a grocery store. If somebody came in and said, where's the water? I'd point them to the drinking fountain, right? And if that wasn't working, I'd say, well, go outside and turn on the hose. I mean, we had water. Nobody thought about water. And then all of a sudden, I watched it all happen. All of a sudden, there's a few little sailing of bottled water, and it'd be just one little small shelf. And now, you go in the supermarkets, you got an entire aisle of bottled water. And some of that, by the way, is very questionable. Some of the bottled water, you have to be very careful with it, because some of it, they're simply bottling up tap water. And if you're going to drink that, why pay for it when you get it out of the tap? It's really incredible. So, what's the deal? Well, if you can control people by controlling the food, just think how you control people if you control the water. Because we can go several days, maybe a week or so, without food, be real hungry, but we can get along. But if you don't have water after 2 or 3 days, you're just going to be dead. Water is incredibly important. And not only that, but the EPA has found that a whole third of our nation's water supplies are contaminated with at least 18 hazardous contaminants. And why is that? Well, they're trying to get us to drink bottled water. We know that last year, Governor Jerry Brown ordered mandatory water use reduction in California, and I was feeling really bad for him until I went out there last summer, and I went to Palm Springs, and a friend of mine took me to one of their 125 golf courses in Palm Springs, and here was a beautiful course, and the sprinklers, they're all springing, and everything looks great, and then I find out there's 125 of them, and I go, wait a minute, they've built 125 golf courses in the middle of the desert, and then they wonder why they have no water? Come on, folks, surely we can do better than this. Here's some Sweeney's sodium fluoride from the 1930s. Insecticide is effective against cockroaches, water bugs, and lice on poultry, but careful, it's poison. And they're putting it in your water supply. And why is that? Well, because they have found out that fluoride is a neurotoxic chemical that, when added to drinking water, interrupts the basic function of the nerve cells in the brain, causing docile, submissive behavior and IQ devastation. Charles Perkins came back from Germany after the war, and he said that German chemists have worked out a very ingenious and far-reaching plan adopted by the German General Staff to control the population of any given area through mass medication of drinking water supply. In this scheme of mass control, sodium fluoride occupied a prominent place. The Nazis figured out that if you put just a little bit of this poison into the drinking water, that it numbs you down, dulls you down, makes you submissive, passive, non-resistant. So they put it in the water of the concentration camps. When the Soviets came in, overran Germany, they picked up on this and they did the same thing for the gulags, okay? So just remember, when you're drinking your tap water, you're just getting slowly poisoned with sodium fluoride, and maybe this is why we can't seem to get excited about anything anymore, okay? We've been dug down, drugged out, and of course, they've even did a 2012 study of 8,000 kids, and they showed that the ones in the high fluoride areas had significantly lower IQ scores than the ones in the low fluoride areas. And just in case you want to know how this came about, this all came about in the late 40s with some people who worked for Reynolds Aluminum, okay? And they were hired to do a study to see if they couldn't figure out something to do with sodium fluoride, because it was kind of a waste product of the aluminum processing thing. And another thing that y'all probably don't know is sodium fluoride was also a huge problem as a waste product from the construction of nuclear weapons, atomic bombs. So they got all this deadly stuff. They can't dump it in the river because the river goes in the ocean, and there are international treaties against putting sodium fluoride in the ocean. So what do? They hire these two guys to do a study, and they decided that male children predominantly, between the age of 6 and 12, if they had a dollop of sodium fluoride in their water, it might cause them to have a few fewer cavities. But only for males, only 6 to 8. And if they're under 6, just go home and look at your toothpaste. If it's got fluoride in it, look at the back, read the fine print. It'll say, if they swallow this, contact the disease control, okay, poison center. It's poison, and it dumbs you down. So, what's this fracking all about? Now there's a big big controversy over fracking. And fracking, of course, is simply where they take a well that supposedly is dry, gas and oil, and then they pump steam down in there and water filled with a lot of chemicals, including lead, uranium, mercury, hydrochloric acid, formaldehyde, and they pump all this down there under pressure, and it opens up cracks. And supposedly we can get more oil and gas out of all this. But remember what I told you earlier? We don't need any more oil and gas. We got all we need. So why do they continue doing this fracking, which is causing tremendous problems in several states? In Oklahoma, up until a few years ago, they had an equivalent of maybe 1 earthquake a year, and now they're having 30 and 40, and it's all because of the fracking, and that's been determined. So what's going on here? They are destroying the water tables so that we are forced to buy their bottled water. And the rich people, they are the big ones. They are the ones behind it. Here's T. Boone Pickens, who has bought up a lot of the aquifer, the Olagala aquifer up through the Midwest, which supplies most of the water for our food crops from wheat, corn, everything in the Midwest. Warren Buffett, who we know is another big investor, he's been heavily invested in water technology that produces treatments and filtering membranes. But here's the one that got me. A couple of years ago or so, there was an item in the mainstream media that the Bushes had bought something like almost 300,000 acres in Paraguay. Well, you know, knowing the Bushes family's background into the Nazis, and you know, the patriarch Prescott Bush was actually stripped of his holdings in Union Banking Corporation in late 1942 by the U.S. government as being nothing but a financial front man for Hitler and the Nazis. So when I heard that they had bought all this land down in Paraguay, I just kind of figured, well, I guess they're going to flee and go down there and hide out and maybe set up a housing development, probably call it Borman Acres. But then I find out that this land they bought in Paraguay sits over the Guarani Aquifer, the largest single body of groundwater in the world. So they're buying up the water. And we now know that these companies, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Perrier, got your Fiji water there, which is, by the way, pretty good water. But that's who's controlling the water. And if you stop and think about it, if you're buying those little bottles of water and you buy, 12-pack or whatever, if you pour all that down and make it a gallon, you're paying more for water today than you are for a gallon of gasoline. Now, isn't that incredible? I bet you I had a hard time convincing you that that's the case when you all were little kids drinking out of the garden hose. We know about air pollution, and so I'll skip through this pretty easily, but they need to be doing something about pollution. It's just killing us. Here is the British School of Beijing's inflatable dome. Beijing has such air quality problems that they had to build this plastic dome so the kids at the British school could actually play, have exercise and play sports. The EPA's head, Gina McCarthy, says that 1 in 10 American kids now suffer from asthma. I know when I was a kid, I don't even recall anybody with asthma. And now I know my granddaughter's friends come home from school, and I swear every 2 or 3 of them have those inhalers. And of course, by the way, I won't go into this because it's pretty scary, but the Fukushima is still spewing radiation. And the Pacific is almost dead, but they're not telling you about that because that's scary. And they want you to keep voting. How that's going to end, I don't know. It's been estimated this could be a extinction level event eventually, but I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. As you can see here, the currents are now blowing all that radiation across the Pacific and into the United States. Former Prime Minister in Japan, Naoto Kan, says it's impossible to totally prevent any kind of accident, disaster happening. I've come to change my position. The only way to do this is to totally get rid of nuclear power plants. And that's really the truth. And yet, check this out. The little black odds, these are all the nuclear power plants, and all that red area is where the tornadoes hit. Now, isn't that weird? If they're going to put all these nuclear plants, why didn't they put them out in the west somewhere? And of course, chemtrails, we know about that. If you don't, you need to look into it because they are spraying barium, aluminum oxide, pathogens, lead, mercury, strontium, heavy metals, all in the sky. And I'm an award-winning aviation writer, and I tell you, I know the difference between a condensation trail and a chemtrail. And believe me, they're spraying us. I mean, look at this. Is that natural? I ask you. Or better yet, think of the days when you have seen a clear blue sky. Does that mean nobody's flying? No, come on. In fact, just for your edification, here's the difference. Contrail streams out behind the airplane. It's ice crystals condensing in the upper atmosphere, and it will disappear pretty quick and evaporate into the air. The chemtrail goes from horizon to horizon, will not dissipate, spreads out into a thin, milky haze, and settles over the countryside. Here we can see same plane, and they cut on their spraying, and then they cut it off. If that's just engine exhaust, let me tell you something. You don't have to be an award-winning aviation writer to know you don't cut off your engines in mid-flight. So it's geoengineering, and this is something that we have to worry about. And now, when you combine the aluminum and oxide of the chemtrails added to the fluoride in the water, it enhances both, and it helps in absorption in the human body. So this is what's happening to us. We all know, too, that there's problems with extremely low frequency radiation, RF radiation, and we've got to teach our kids to be very, very prudent with the cell phones, because basically you're holding a radio transmitter receiver up to your head, and it's actually been shown. Look at the difference between the heat of this person and before and then after using a cell phone. You do this for a while, you're going to have a real problem. This poor guy. I hope he's not looking forward to having babies. We also realize TV is mind control. If you want to really kind of get your head together and start figuring out what's really going on, here's the deal. Turn off your TV, okay? Leave it off for about... Leave it off for about 2 weeks and you're going to find out two important things. Number one, you're not going to miss anything important. If your city is nuked or World War III starts, you'll know about it, okay? You're not going to miss anything. Number two, you're going to suddenly probably feel better because you're not bombarded daily 24/7 with this bad news and bad things and ISIS and, murders and rapes and robberies and you'll start to feel better about yourself and about life, and you'll find out that you're able to think for yourself instead of whatever the TV is conditioning you to. We also, of course, have a problem with education because you take bright, young, curious kids and you send them to school and pretty soon they're dragging home and you say, "What you do in school today?" "Oh, nothing." And pretty soon they're dulled down, they're drugged out, and they are conditioned and turned into little robotots, So we have to be very careful about this. And that's because John D. Rockefeller, who founded the General Education Board, which became the National Education Society, was quoted as saying, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." And that's what we're training these kids for right now, plus being good inmates. When I went to school, you just went to school. Now you have to go through metal detectors. You have cops roam in the halls. And you have teachers ordering everybody around. In elementary school, you have to get in the line, put your hand on each other's shoulder, and walk to the bathroom or walk to, we're teaching them to be prisoners. Is that what we really want? And look at this. This one blows me away. Here's the express line, 15 item limit, and 15 is this many. Oh, my God. And it gets worse. In my book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, I had this editor in New York who was questioning me on everything, and some of it was driving me nuts. It's like, what's wrong with this guy? And I finally got talking with him. He was 23 years old. 23 years old, and he's editing my book, okay? And I'm getting queries, I swear to God, I'm getting queries like this. "What's a bank run?" He didn't know. The worst one was I had written something about some of these banks that were getting the TARP money, the tax money, that were not even in trouble. And I said, this bank, so I named the bank, I said, this bank got TARP money even though it was solvent. I get a query from this 23-year-old kid. He says, "What do you mean by solvent?" I had to call him up and say, "Look, if we go to lunch and I tell you I can't pay for my lunch because I'm insolvent, do you know what that means?" And he went, "Oh, yeah, sure." I said, "Well, then guess what solvent means?" Just incredible. And, of course, now we're into the police state. It used to be, the boys in blue. I was always taught if you get in trouble, go find a kindly policeman. He'll help you out. And then I've seen that change over my entire life. And when my little girls were little and we're driving around the car, it'd be, "Look out, Dad, there's a cop." When did we get to this? The cops should be on our side. In fact, if you think about this, to me, 3 of the most important jobs in society is a police officer, a teacher, and a journalist. And yet these are 3 of the most despised, ill-paying jobs in our whole economy. It's not right. So when did these guys become these guys? And I'll tell you, part of the problem is that what you'll find in my book is that police agencies in this country are being advised and trained by Israel. Now, Israel's got a whole different situation. They're surrounded by enemies, and they've got real problems. And so they treat everybody, you're guilty until proven innocent, because they can't afford to do anything less. So why have we got them teaching our police to be, stormtroopers? You're guilty until, and you see where it's leading to. The police today, I know I was a police reporter in the 50s, in the 60s, and it's all changed now. Now they're like combat troops, and you're guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. And I don't have to tell you guys that because you've already seen that right here in Philadelphia. They shut down the whole city because of one wounded 17-year-old. Good God, and we put up with it, see? That's why I have a real problem. I can't decide who's the more guilty. The leadership that wants us under total control, or us that put up with it. Under constant surveillance, they say by the year 2020, there's going to be 30,000 drones in the air. Isn't that going to be fun? You go try to take out the garbage and somebody's spying at you. Briefly, now we know all this. This used to be conspiracy theory, and now, thanks to Edward Snowden, we know that it's conspiracy fact. Now, of course, there are those who want to try to get Snowden back here and try him and hang him as a traitor. Personally, I think he's a hero. All right? But they're right in our face about a lot of this. Some of y'all remember last summer, everybody's upset about Jade Helm, this joint military exercise that was taking place involving local police, which is a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, and unlike that. Well, look at the insignia, official insignia of the Jade Helm. You got the crossed arrows, that means air power. You got the sword, which is ground power. And look right in the middle, there's this little white blob thing and nobody paid much attention to. And you see what it is. It's a wooden clog, a wooden shoe. And why would they put that up there? Because what we know is that the Nazi concentration camps gave you striped pajamas and wooden clogs. Why? So they could hear you coming and you can't run very fast and you're not going to get away. Now, why would they put that on a 2015 U.S. military exercise? Folks, it's all happening, and it's happening under the radar because of the 5 corporations that will not tell you all of this. And so here we are. It's all being managed, all being controlled through secret societies like the Trilateral Commission. Notice how their stylized logo looks suspiciously like a swastika. The Council on Foreign Relations, look how their logo, that would be the one to your left, matches that of the old Knights Templars. So see, all of this has gone on throughout history. It's not fascism when we do it, says the Democrats and the Republicans. And by the way, let me end you with this here. We're getting down to the end here. We do not any longer have a 2-party state. We are a 1-party nation. We have, that one party has a slightly liberal left wing called the Democrats, and it's got a slightly right wing called the Republicans. But they are both answer to the one party, the war party. Because, you know, they can argue over certain social issues like stem cell research or abortion or whatever, and they keep us fighting with each other over that, so we don't look up and realize that the money, the wealth of this country is being sucked away by the war party into unnecessary wars. But part of the reason is what I just showed you, to reduce the population. So, hope's the joke, and the change is what's left in your pocket. And don't think that this is something against the Democrats, because the Republicans are just as bad. And in fact, the only thing I can see right now, I got to hand it to Donald Trump. If nothing else, he is now showing even the dullest of us that the system is rigged and that it really doesn't matter, that we're not in control. I mean, I feel for every Republican in Colorado because they just got disenfranchised. They don't get a vote. And don't think you all are any better because they've got it rigged from the top to bottom. People ask me, you know, who are you going to vote for? And I tell them, do you watch the wide world of wrestling? And they go, oh, no, it's rigged. I said, case closed. So, in ending up, I thank you for your time. I hope y'all paid some attention. I got a handful of books left if you want to get those. But you need to start asking yourself, are you going to be working for freedom or are you going to be supporting the police state? And lastly, I'll just put it this way. I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you.
Buy my book. Thank you.
Jim Mars, ladies and gentlemen.